All right, we're going to get started. Please stand for the pledge. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, thank you. Could you please make sure that your cell phones are either on silent or turned off, please? Okay, seeing that we have no one for public forum, I'm gonna turn it over to Mr. Van Horman and pick out whichever lovely group is going to go first.
Wonderful. So we have our first presentation this evening is going to come from our in-house instructional coaches. So we have four in-house instructional coaches. Those four individuals are here with us this evening and are going to walk us through a quick presentation. So I'd like to introduce Pam Clunan, Michelle McIntyre, Haley Bybee, and Molly Smith, if they would like to come up to the lectern. And I'm not sure how they have structured their presentation. Looks like Michelle is going to start us off. So.
She knows. That's the important one. All right. Well, first of all, I'm Michelle McIntyre, and Pam Clunan, Haley Bybee, and Molly Smith. We'd like to thank you for the opportunity to let you know a little bit about this new program here in Red Creek, this instructional coaching initiative. Now, if you look at the four of us here, between us, we have over 100 years of teaching here at Red Creek. Think about that. So we have seen trends come and go. We have seen things that have worked, things that haven't, things that's worked for us but not for other people, and vice versa. With that experience, along with the great training that we had coming into these jobs, we feel pretty confident that we're grounded in best practices and what's best for Red Creek moving forward. So with that, with all those diverse experiences, we have pretty full tool belts, and we can offer an awful lot to new folks and to people who have been here for a long time. You're looking, between the four of us, we've taught in all of the buildings, here in the district. So this year, we have worn many hats, with this being the first year of instructional coaching. We have helped teachers set up protocols, systems, and expectations in classrooms. We've helped them develop classroom management and discipline practices. We've helped them access curriculum and materials. We've helped them cultivate team relationships. We've helped them analyze their course rigor or lack thereof. And we have observed and offered feedback, but remember, we're not administrators, so us going into classes, it's not evaluative. Thank you. It's not evaluative. So we can help folks start something new, try something different, work towards doing something, and it's not judgmental. We can help them and give suggestions and help them along. It's really been eye-opening, and really our office is pretty full of conversation and wonderful things that we're seeing, and with all of our diverse experiences, we're able to give each other tips and tricks to give to some of our folks if we're stuck with something. So it's really a pretty interesting year and a very positive one for us. Now Molly's going to walk us through kind of where we have been so far this year.
So we started in August, and we started with our own journey in our own professional development and learning, and we had PD here from our BOCES coaches, from Jen, talking about classroom management and social emotional learning and standards, all sorts of things that we can use to help bring back to the people that we work with. One of the other things that is really a priority for all of us is to focus on that relationship building, and that's what this first year is all about, is building relationships with the people that we are supporting, because without that, they're not going to listen to us. So that really is step one, is building those relationships, building the trust, so they will trust us, and then we can move on from there. So it really is setting up, like Michelle said, those systems, those structures. Really surveying staff to get their input, though, is important to us, and get that feedback so that we can help provide professional development when, with what they want, when they want it, whether it's before school hours or after school hours. We're trying to be very cognizant of making sure that we do that. So we've been working on that. we'll continue to offer different professional development, and working on building those relationships, and hopefully with a focus on more like intentional planning and preparation.
Hello. All right, so this year, I'm technically the new teacher coach, so I'm helping to welcome people into the district. It could be a brand new teacher, new to the district, maybe somebody in the district who's changing what they're doing, different grade levels, different team. So it really helped troubleshoot a lot. You don't even think, and Jolene, I thought about you on my way here, starting a new job. You know your job, but you don't know the culture, right? So that's a lot of what we're doing is troubleshooting, planning, building relationships, settling people into our culture. So hopefully they become acclimated and want to stay, right? That would be really good. I've done personal developments individually with people. We have new teachers very, very willing to come in before school hours, stay late after the school day to try and wrap their heads around what it is that they need to do. Based on what we've seen, we've said things like, oh, wow, new teachers should have known that coming in. So we're already building PD for new teachers coming in next year or folks trying to settle in. So we're looking forward to summer professional development. We have noticed we need a little less overlap with mentoring. We have a really good mentoring program, but some people are getting dosed and double dosed and triple dosed, and some just need a little breathing room, so we'll work on that a little bit. Really intentional team building, because I've never been in elementary school. It's interesting for me to see the way those teams work and people being moved around. Middle school, high school teams are a little bit different because they're not grade levels, it's more content oriented. But we really need to work on those norms and those roles and those grade level expectations and that consistency. And what I mean by that is getting people, good people here, get them acclimated and get them to stay. So that's the new teacher update. Moving on.
So I'm going to talk about one of the PDs that we're offering in-house, and it's super exciting. We have 21 K-6 participants, and it is led by Cheryl Howell and myself, and it's centered around the Natalie Wexler's work she wrote a book called The Knowledge Gap, and they're doing she also does a podcast called Knowledge Matters. So we are meeting twice a month. We started in November, and we're meeting for an hour after school to engage in dialogue related to Wexler's work in the book and in the podcast. The core idea of her work is that students need a strong knowledge base in their long-term memories in order to comprehend complex text. So we're focusing on the idea of comprehension, and we're looking at building knowledge, or looking at curriculum, and specifically knowledge building curriculum. So we're hoping for some great work in the area of curriculum at the elementary level. It's going really well.
So another book study that I'm running is called Building Thinking Classrooms in Mathematics, K-12. And I have representatives from all three buildings. There's about 10 of us. We just started this week, but we'll be meeting twice a month to go over these different practices. And within the book, they talk about 14 different practices that you can use to enhance thinking in classrooms. Because what the author found through research is that many times students are busy taking notes, filling out worksheets, or working on problems, but they're not actually thinking. They're just mimicking or stalling or whatever. So we're looking at each one of those practices and then taking those practices, taking that research and taking it back to the classroom and then coming back and talking about it, like what does this look like? So like I said, we met one time, but it was great. We had a great conversation, and so I'm really looking forward to it, and everybody was excited to get into it because there's not always a lot of books around math, and so this was an interesting topic to be able to do and to talk about. And again, it's after school and everybody's willing to stay, so we're very fortunate that we can do that. And then this year I'm also the Seal of Literacy Coordinator. So on the one side it tells you just about the reasons why to do the Seal of Literacy. This is not a new program for our school. We have, you can see we have 4 years, so we're a veteran school, but what we're trying to do is set up systems to make this, to grow the program and to keep it sustainable for our school, knowing that like less than 3% of all graduating seniors earn this seal. We want to make sure that we can continue to grow the program here. And so you can see this year we have 6 seniors attempting it. And then we have currently 14 juniors that will be attempting. This year they're working on the ELA portion. Next year they'll work on getting the Spanish portion of that. And so in our conversations, we meet monthly. We have a committee, we meet monthly. We're really trying to talk about how do we celebrate this and then how do we grow this program throughout our school, and really starting at like the freshman level, right? Like looking at freshmen. We've talked about letting kids not opting in, but instead you have to opt out of it. So if you are taking college Spanish, it's not a choice, right? Like you're just automatically opting in unless you opt out to help grow that program. We've also assigned each student will be getting an advisor, but we're letting them pick their advisor. So someone that they work with just to help them through the process. They don't have to speak the language, but it's another person to touch base with just to say, how are you doing? What can I help you? How can I support you with this? So, and that seems to be going really well.
Speaking of supporting students, I'm going to just talk about my role as the MTSS coordinator and instructional coach this year. So MTSS is a framework for supporting students across academics, social, emotional, and behavioral learning. And we think about it in 3 tiers. Tier 1 is what is our first line of defense. It's just a high quality curriculum delivered to our students in an engaging way. And then when students are not responding to that, then we move them up to a new level of support where we're adding a more targeted intervention, usually in a small group. And then tier 3 is for when students still are not responding to that tier 2 intervention, where we intensify the intervention by either decreasing their group size, increasing the frequency or the number of repetitions that we're providing for the student. So in that thinking, as far as tier 1 goes right now, my focus for tier 1 instruction is social emotional learning across all 3 buildings, just making sure that we know that all students are learning those competencies to go into the world, knowing how to interact socially, how to channel their emotions in a positive way. Tier 2, we're working just to make sure that across buildings we're building frameworks so that when we have students not responding to tier 1, that it's easy and efficient for us to provide them supports. So making sure that we have the capacity to respond to student needs in those small group interventions across those 3 areas. As far as tier 3 goes, still just across buildings, making sure that we have those frameworks to make sure that we have opportunities for more individualized, more intensified interventions for kids. We're looking at how we're collecting data, how we're analyzing and tracking data. In Tyler, we kind of have started a new data meeting protocol with grade levels after benchmark assessments in September. We brought grade levels together, we looked at the data together. AIS intervention groups were formed for math and for reading, and then the remainder of the students were sifted into needs-based groups where all teachers are helping provide targeted instruction to students during that AIS time period. It's been really exciting to be part of that process because I get to hear all of the amazing things that teachers are coming up with to do to make sure that we're meeting the needs of all of our students, from the kids who are having the hardest time all the way to the students who are looking for a challenge. And it's been really great to also see teachers coming around the table together, sharing what they've been doing, how it's been going, how students are responding to what they've been doing. So that's actually been the highlight of my role so far this year. I've also been working as the coach for all of the interventionists in the district and the middle school special education teachers. So I've had the opportunity to set up some
levels, so that people can see what their colleagues are doing, in the reading department in particular, so that they see this is where these students have come from, this is how they're performing in these earlier grades. Now you get to see from the younger perspective where they're headed and what the expectation is as we move forward. I've also brought together all of the interventionists in the district twice now to talk about what is our role, what do we do, how do we do it, just to kind of standardize our practice a little bit, and make sure that we know that our systems are working to capacity for our students. And as far as, and I've been really working hard on the responsiveness piece, just that we're efficiently responding to the needs that are brought to our attention as far as students go and as far as supports go. And piggybacking on that responsiveness piece, professional development that all of the coaching team has been working on. We've been really working to make sure that what we're offering is in response to both what teachers have expressed that they're looking for through a survey back in October, as well as what we're seeing in our day-to-day coaching interactions with people. So I know you can read the slide yourself of the things that we've offered so far. We've been sending out a monthly professional development catalog that draws from in-house offerings, from BOCE's offerings, as well as webinars we know from high-quality websites and companies. And we've had a really great response from teachers. You've heard about some of the offerings and all of the feedback that we've been getting and all of the participation. It's been really exciting to be a part of. And with that, we just want to thank you for the opportunity, for the investment in this coaching model. I know it's been exciting for all of us to step into a new role, to try something new. I know for me it's been a really interesting mental challenge, thinking in a new way, interacting with people on a whole different level. So thank you very much for that opportunity. Any questions?
Any questions?
I do. I'm a question asker. Let me just go back through. I just really more of a comment than a question. When Michelle was talking about the new teacher information, I loved the focus of, to get them here, to get them acclimated, to get them to want to stay. Because I think that's a really key to where we're at in our process here at Red Creek right now, is retention. Bringing in those new teachers and getting them to want to stay, not just teachers, but all of our staff. So I think I loved that part. I forget who it was that was talking about the building thinking classrooms in math. Oh, yes. So you had mentioned that you're reading and then you're going and you're putting it, taking it into your classrooms to see. What are you seeing when you're putting it into your class?
So we've only had one meeting.
Oh, okay.
So some people have read ahead though, and we're already like trying some of the different strategies, and so one of the strategies that talks about is this random grouping. And when students can see that you're actually randomizing the groups, right, they're more apt to be engaged and to then work harder and longer on the task, where even if you say, no, they really are random groups, they're like, I don't think so, right? But if they can see, like, if you do cards or equity 6, then they're more apt to believe that, and there's research that shows that they will work with whomever they're partnered with. However, it's that changes every hour. Like, so every day you would have a different random group that you would be working with on that thinking task.
Awesome, cool.
Yeah.
Thank you. Because I don't know, can you tell me what the seal of biliteracy is?
So it kind of explains that on that one half. It tells you like why you get it, but So the students get a seal on their diploma, but then they also get a medal, and it recognizes that they are proficient in 2 languages. So
What,
for us, it would be
what
English.
makes them proficient, like what do they have to do to get to
So
that?
there's 3 points
Did I
they
miss
have to get for the English language arts, and they can get that in a variety of ways. They can do it if they get an 80 or above on the Regents exam, if they get a 3 or above on the AP exam, one of the AP English exams. They have to have an 85 or above for both junior and senior year in English, or they can do a culminating project, which is worth 2 points. All those other things are worth 1 point, so they just need 3 points, but then they also need 3 points in their world language. And for them, it would be, again, the average of the class, but they have to do a project, because there's not as many assessments. So the projects are built in, they're embedded within their class, but then the presentations happen like outside of that class, and there's a rubric that the state puts out that we would use to show their proficiency.
Great, I love that we participate, that's fantastic.
Can I jump in with a question really quick?
Of course.
Okay. So, thinking that I know that the answer is probably gonna be, of course, we could have more people. Cause that's typically the answer, but can you explain to me, I guess, how you feel about your workload and how it was divvied up? I'll take anybody.
We started at the beginning of the year with caseloads basically, and then what was it, a month or so in, you know, we sat with Mrs. Devaney and we said, some of this isn't working well, we could use our time more wisely. So we've ended up with more teams, instead of 2 or 3 people dealing with one grade level, maybe 1 or perhaps 2 people are dealing with a grade level. So you just have more consistency within. Now, I have 16, and I think 15 of them are new to the district. Hopefully, that number goes down, right? We're supporting people who have been here for a while.
Yeah, and I have teachers from K to 12. I have about 19 to 20 teachers, and I'm working also with the entire 3rd grade since they're new to 3rd grade. So we work every Friday morning before school, just on building some supports for the third grade team. So I've got 19 to 24, if you count the third grade, K to 12 teachers.
Okay.
So I have pre-K through 12 teachers, and I have about 24 on my caseload, and I have a couple of grade levels, but I also have departments as we get into high school.
Okay.
So it's interesting.
I have 12 on my caseload, plus the tiered coaches in all of the buildings, plus the MTSS coordinating. So some days it feels like a lot, and other days it feels very manageable. So it depends on what day you ask
Okay.
me.
I find it interesting that you use the word caseload, which is great. But do you feel that it's manageable as a team right now with 4?
Well, we also
We have the
we
BOE coaches, that is so helpful.
Well,
Once a week.
I'm gonna say in-house. Do you feel that?
So we all have different kinds of schedules because of the people that we have. I meet with people every week. I've met every week with everybody on my list since the beginning of the year, and I'm just starting to change it up so that I can get into more classrooms.
We tend to meet monthly, minimum monthly, sometimes it's more, but at minimum, at least once a month. And then I found that most of my people sign up as an appointment, like within the first couple of weeks of a month. So then I send out a little check-in, like towards the end of the month, just like a little, like me, right? Like, how's that going? And then any celebrations or questions. So it's just another quick check-in for me with them.
Part of the reason that I asked is because you had mentioned that you had some teachers that were being hit maybe more than once or more than twice or more than 3 times because of the mentoring program. So I just didn't know kind of how you felt about how it was working as far as managing your time.
I feel like my caseload and my PD work that I do is manageable, and I think that Jen Devaney put in some nice supports for us, having the BOCES coaches as mentors for us to figure out how to manage our time and how to manage our schedules for meeting with teachers, but then also to offer the in-house professional development. It has been incredibly helpful. So So I feel like it's very manageable.
Okay, thank you. Other side.
Am I allowed to take questions from the
I
audience?
think so.
Am I good?
Yes, please.
My question is this like one entire system or is it 4 separate ones? That was never really clear through your presentation.
As far as the MTSS triangle that was up there, or the coaching?
Just the entire presentation as a whole. Like, I don't really understand the main goals and motivations of the system you're trying to like, implement.
Okay, so we are instructional coaches, so we're certified teachers who have, instead of teaching students, we're kind of supporting and coaching teachers in our school district. And each of us is working with different groups of teachers to help them try out new strategies, to look at how students are doing and tweak their practice based on how
Okay, so
they're
this is all one system?
doing.
Okay, so the TLDR, this is more or less just teachers training teachers?
Yes.
Okay,
Yeah.
thank you.
Sure, glad to clear that up.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm not too worried about it, but I'm just curious. For the personal development, it says there's like explicit direct instructions, enriching learning, and data analysis with DataMate. What does data analysis with DataMate entail?
So why don't you talk about
Well,
it?
I can talk about DataMate. So DataMate is a program that teachers can use to create assessments, and right now, they can use through 8 assessments, like the ELA and math that you all took. Okay, and then they also have high school regents exams, and so they have a bank of these, and so then they can get assessments or your weekly reviews that you all used to do, right? They can use old state assessment questions to build those, and then they will also mirror what the computer-based testing now looks like for grades 3 through 8. So it can give those students a little bit of extra practice with taking a test on a computer.
And regents, right?
And yes, regents exams are on there. Yeah. And so the data analysis, that'll analyze the data, so that'll help the teacher know, like, what standards are students proficient in, or where do I need to, like, refine, right? Like, what do I need to go back and reteach, because, oh dear, nobody got this. Does that make sense?
Yes, thank
Okay, you're welcome.
Any other questions?
I have one more. If I'm remembering correctly from when this program was initially presented to us, it was being paid for basically with the COVID funds. As we know, those are going away. And there was a mention in there that year 1, this is a good year to develop those relationships. So what is the funding and potential looking like moving into multiple years, into our next years of taking it to the next step?
I think that's just part of our budget process, of course, right? To kind of analyze the things that are working well for us, and and Danielle will get into this in a few minutes, but we're exploring other grant opportunities as well that might support the continuation of a coaching model. Again, I think it's, what's interesting and really rewarding to hear is this, as you just mentioned, this program didn't exist here prior to July. It was a concept on paper and in theory, and this group of go-getters has really taken a lot of that theory and put it into practice on a daily basis. And when we were looking, I think what's evident here is the go-getter attitude of the 4 individuals that are kind of building this program on a day-to-day basis, and looking at ways that it can expand beyond just this year. So it was kind of hard at the beginning to see what's the sustainability, but also the vision beyond year 1. And I think this group has really started to take off with the work. Again, within 6 months, you see this kind of the scope and the depth of the work that they're doing. So it's certainly in our budget conversations.
So more of a statement than a question, but I know all of you, I recognize how wonderful of a group of teachers that we have, that we've let out of their teaching roles to do this, and I know that change can be hard and uncomfortable, and being uncomfortable is where we grow, so I appreciate all of you taking that step and being uncomfortable in a role that you're creating, basically, from the ground up, and I think you guys are doing a wonderful job, so thank you.
Thank you.
Anybody else?
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we have one more presentation, of course.
The exciting stuff.
This is the good stuff. So Danielle DiBiase, our new business administrator, again, started just December 1st, so we're talking about 5 weeks ago. Danielle started here with us, and in that 5 weeks, Danielle has kind of been tasked with this enormous responsibility of trying to get up to speed with where we are on our budget development process. And, you know, we've kind of had some at-length discussions about the method of presentation and how this information gets out in a transparent and thoughtful way. So this is kind of the first step. This is obviously according to our budget calendar, budget development calendar, this is kind of step one with this, so this is very preliminary information. And as you go through a budget process, as we get closer and closer to those deadlines in May, the numbers become more refined just as we get more time and get more certainty from the state that locks in a lot of this information. So, but Danielle will kind of take you through some pieces of our budget development and some of the next steps and where we are with this. So go ahead, Danielle.
Thank you, and thank you for having me. So just as Mr. Norman said, what I want to kind of do tonight is set the stage for where we're at financially, give you a broad picture of where we've been before, where we see things headed. A lot of things are still in flux, but I want to give that foundation so that as we move into those conversations, you have a good idea of what's normal for Red Creek and where we're moving forward with that. So, all right. So this is just a general budget timeline. This matches with the budget development calendar that was approved by the board. So I won't go through every date, but just a reminder of what this looks like for us to be able to meet that May 21 vote date. Some key information to keep in mind with this budget process is right now we're very fortunate that the projections for state aid do involve increases. So they're not as substantial as they were when the state was pushing for the full funding of the foundation aid. But still a good sign for us to see that they are looking towards increasing the overall education budget. One of the things that I wanted to talk about is the Stronger Connections grant. So that is a grant that we have applied for. If we receive it, it would be able to support a lot of the functions that are currently being paid for through those COVID stimulus grants that are set to end. We do have declining enrollment, which will impact our state aid. So a lot of our figures are based on what our enrollment is. As that number goes down, our state aid will go down as well. And then the other thing to mention is the continuation of the CEP program, which is the provision of free meals to all students in the district. So talking about the grants, those stimulus grants, 3 rounds, the CARES, CRISA, and ARP. The ARP is the last round and it's ending on September 30th of 2024. So when we talk about the 24-25 budget, those grants are really only available for about 1 month. The summer months as well for any summer programming, but as far as regular staff that are supported through those grants, only that 1 month would be covered. So within that, there are a lot of sub-grants. There's the ESSER 3, which is the main funding, the summer enrichment, which we have used to cover our summer programming, comprehensive after school, which supports our 21st century program, the ARP learning loss, and the ARP homeless. So those are all in that stimulus package that is set to expire at the end of September of next year. The school climate transformation grant also ends in September of next year. At the same time, all of the other grants that the district typically utilizes, the title grants, the IDEA grants, those are anticipated to renew as normal, and we are of course reviewing and always looking out for new opportunities to apply for funding that we can use here at Red Creek. Alright, so this is a lot of numbers, but I want to tell you what those numbers mean. We have at the very top our 2014 capital reserve. The beginning balance as of 6/30 of last year, that comes from our audited financial statements. So that's just where we ended last year. And then our balance as of today. So the capital reserve has had some changes. We had 225,000 that was added in August. We had another 710,000 that was added from the liability reserve when the vote for the capital project went through. And then $1 million came out to be used from that capital reserve. So that's why you see that number dropping a little, even though in your heads, you know, we've added some money there. Same thing, the liability reserve, you see it dropping from 700,000 to 2,000. That's that transfer into the capital reserve, and then those funds were then taken out for the project. And then the EBLAR, employee benefit reserve, that as well, same thing, there was a transfer from that approved by the board, and I believe it was on December 5th for about $19,000. So that is why overall you see that reserve number going down. That's just a result of us planning to use those funds for something and then actually taking them and using them. So still a healthy balance in those reserves. And this just paints that picture for you. Over time, where have our reserves gone? That sharp incline that you see is from COVID. We had fewer expenditures than we expected. We ended up with a little more money than we expected because of that, and we put it into our reserves. And then when you see that decline, that's the use in the capital project and for other purposes. So just to give you an idea, we're still much, much higher than we were in 2018-19, so we're still very well funded. So this gives you a picture of how do we actually fund our budget. So we know that in New York State we have to have a balanced budget. Our revenues have to equal what we expect to spend during the year. This is our projected revenues as of right now. We have a little increase in state aid of that $18.4 million. That's about 75% of our funding comes from New York State. Our tax levy as it stands right now is set where it was for 23-24. So this is talking just as it's set now, no additional increases at that 4.9 million. And then we have a small remainder that comes from federal aid, miscellaneous revenues, an interfund transfer, and pilot agreements, which are payments in lieu of paying taxes on the assessment rolls. So overall, we're looking at about $24.3 million projected. That is without an increase to the tax levy, and that is without the use of reserves or fund balance, which we have in the past couple of years used to close that gap between the budget and what our revenues were projected to be. So just to give you a baseline of what we're looking at overall, that will of course change once the state releases their projections from the governor's office. Again, a lot of numbers. They're there for you, but I want to tell you what they mean. This is the admin component. We have three parts in our budget: admin, program, and capital. Admin, for the most part, is going to be the principals, superintendent's office, the business office, some of those district-wide components. And in here, you can see that it remains mostly flat. That is because we had an administrative reorg where there was one less position. And then also we have an administrative position that is partially funded through a grant. So that, on the salary piece, made a change for us, as well as some breakage. You'll also see that we have some changes in some of these numbers here. Curriculum development, this was our budget, 150,000 versus 108,000. There's some right sizing where we've budgeted in the past a higher number than what we've actually expensed. So what these projections do is they take a 3 to 5 year average and they say, where do we actually expect to land, rather than necessarily running with the number that we had from the year before. So that's also part of why that number is remaining relatively flat year to year. So what's included in that admin, I'm not going to go all the way through these, but that's what makes up all those numbers. They're all portioned in different areas, but for the most part, like I said, that's going to be the administrative team. Okay. 1 minute. There we go. All right, so for our BOCES forecast, we do have a lot of services that run through the BOCES. And what I have here for you is where we actually ended the previous year, as well as what our current budget is this year, and than what I'm projecting for next year initially. So what I wanna point out is that we had an actual expense of 3.2 million in 22-23, where we budgeted 3.1 million. Now, we know those services go up in cost year to year, so we're already kind of behind the gate, which is why this projection of 3.7 is higher. So if I were to take the 3.2 that we actually ended at and account for a year-to-year increase, I would expect us to be closer to the 3.4, 3.5 in 23-24 when we hit June 30th, and that's why I'm projecting 3.7. So again, that right sizing. Where are we actually spending this money? Where does it land? And making that budget a more transparent reflection of those expenses. The other thing I wanted to point out within this, so you can see in the centralized services, we landed at 262 last year. We budgeted 200,000 for this year, and then coming down to 241 projected. That includes our edutech, a lot of the services that we get through the RIC, things like that. So those fluctuate a little bit year to year based on what we sign up for. The other thing I wanted to point out, a large variance here, regular education, 330,000 we actually spent last year, 449,000 were projected for this year, and then coming up to 405 projected for next year. So there was some variance in that line, but the reason it's not dropping totally down is that we do have some BOCE services that are currently paid for with those stimulus funds that I'm rolling into that number. So to say, all right, we have this much funded through the ARP funds right now, we know those are going away, let's make sure this number reflects that. And then this, the special education number is fairly consistent. The only other big variance that I want you to see here is this technology. And the reason I want to point that out is we last year spent 951,000. We budgeted 525,000. That almost $1 million expense is consistent year to year. So this represents a right sizing of where we've actually spent money with the BOCES. And overall, what this will do is give us a clearer picture moving forward, making sure that the numbers we start the year with are closer to where we end the year with. Just reducing those variances, making things a little more predictable for everyone. So some things to keep in mind with the BOCES budget. Again, this adds those ARP services. It includes everything we're currently signed up for. It does some of that right sizing. I have one correction to make to what's in this slide, which is the process I'm used to is that the BOCES submits an initial service request to us where we tell them, this is what we're thinking of getting next year, and that's what they use to kind of set their rate for the next year. Wayne Finger Lake just got back to me and they said they actually do not use initial service requests. So what does that mean for us as a district? We can predict, well, we're gonna use this many services, but if we don't know that rate, it's gonna change those numbers on us. So we will get those rates and figures towards the end of the budgeting season, they say in March. So just keep in mind that that fluctuation will happen once that comes in, but it'll be way late in our process for budget development. We can still go through, do that needs assessment, make sure that we're paying for what we're using, what's most effective for our district and our students, make sure that if there's anything we're not fully utilizing, we have those conversations and make adjustments as we go along. And then up next, this is, as Mr. Van Orman said, a process. There's a lot of collaboration, a lot of working together to talk about what is fitting with our strategic plan, what's best for the district, how can we use these resources most efficiently. So that will continue throughout this entire process, and then coming up moving forward will be a presentation of that. I'll give an update on the administrative component. There really shouldn't be very many changes. And then the program component, which is of course that main instructional piece, that'll be included as well. And then on February 7th, the third and final component, the capital. And then at that presentation, what my intention would be is to give an overview with all of those pieces together. What does our total picture look like? I believe that's everything I had for you. If there's any questions, I'm happy to go back to certain slides.
Any questions?
On your BOCES pricing, you know, you talked about the changes. And you had mentioned that BOCES charges don't typically go down. And I do agree with you with the right sizing of some of these. I think historically, the district has under budgeted its BOCES expenditures. But there's a few of these, like your centralized services, I know you mentioned, and administrative costs. You're forecasting that those are going to go down. Is there anything particular that you're thinking we're not going to participate with that's causing those estimates to go down?
So at this time, no, we still have to go through and do that needs assessment. These projections are based on a 3 to 5 year average. And what I did
Okay.
notice is in that line, we had some significant variance year to year.
Okay.
Is there any thought, is your treasurer part of the centralized service?
Yes, so our treasurer is through the CDO at Wing Finger Lakes.
Is there any thought or discussion in your 5 weeks of bringing that back in-house?
I haven't quite gotten there, but certainly that's a discussion.
Needs assessment.
We would have, yeah, as part of that needs assessment.
And then with your technology, so your BOCE service, with your current, what you're currently getting billed is about 600,000, a little bit less. So you're still gonna project about $1 million. So is there a replacement plan that's being developed?
So that 500,000 is not what we're currently being billed, it's what was projected. So we have consistently been billed close to that 900,000, $1 million, and that is part of the equipment replacement. Some of those items are for our one-to-one Chromebook initiative, rolling those things off and replacing them. That as well, laying that out year to year, would be part of that needs assessment of saying, okay, is it $1 million this year, 750 the next, or can we keep this consistent year to year?
You're right, because I see that these financials are aged, it's from until November. And in November, you've been billed 300,000, so that's 100,000 a month.
Yep.
So. All right.
Any other questions?
I have one
Oh.
further question.
Yeah.
Back to the reserves, that states that it's expiring, well, it says that it was established in 2014. And as you know, the reserve is only good for 10 years. So have there been any discussions to have a capital reserve established in this coming May?
Yes, so we have talked about that. We have not drafted any proposition language, but typically my recommendation would be to have a capital reserve. So putting that back on the ballot, to have one available so that we can do what we did with this recently approved capital project and help subsidize some of that impact to the tax levy.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Thank you.
Thank you, Danielle. No more presentations
All right.
today.
I was gonna say,
Thank you,
until
ladies.
next time.
All right, we're gonna keep moving then. Could I have a motion, please, for the regular meeting minutes for December 5th, please? Mrs. Allen, a second by Mrs. Kaiser. Any questions, corrections? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, moving on.
Can I make a motion to approve D1 and 2?
You absolutely can, thank you. Can I have a second for that? Mrs. Kaiser? Jolene, I'm not ignoring you, I'm sorry, I looked left first.
I'm slow, it's okay.
I'll stop.
I'm tired, it's all right.
She does that, she puts it like right in front of me. No, I'm just
It's like
kidding.
me.
All right, any questions? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Okay, if it pleases the board, I take a motion for the entire consent agenda, which would be E1 through 5.
I'll make that motion.
Stegman?
Can we pull out E2, 20 and 21? Yeah.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Sorry.
who put that kid on there?
Definitely question.
All right, yeah, exactly.
She's not a kid anymore, you know?
Yeah. Okay, so Mrs. Dingman, would you
Yes.
amend that to remove E 2, 20, and 21, please?
Yes.
Thank you. Could I have a second? Mrs. Allen? Any questions on the group? You don't get to second now. Okay, when you're ready.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
and Mrs. Madigan.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, I would take a motion for E 2, 20, and 21, please. Mrs. Kaiser in a second. Mrs. Decker? If we want to just have a quick discussion about how we feel about this person, no, I'm just kidding. When you're ready.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
I'm going to abstain.
oh, Mrs. Decker, and Mrs. Madigan.
Yes. Thank you. Okay, could I have a motion for F1, please? Mrs.
I don't know that I can put my hand up and like
I can see all the hands from my perspective.
Can I motion 1 through 4?
I was assuming 2 would be a table, is that correct, for first reading? We're gonna approve
Mhm.
those tonight?
We approve it as a first reading.
I thought the first reading just got tabled to the next meeting. Is that,
No, we have to have,
That action allows it to, I believe that action allows it to go to a second reading.
whew,
yes.
apparently somebody didn't drink their caffeine today. So I will take Mrs. Allen's motion for D 1 through 4, second by Ms.,
F1.
that's what I meant, F 1 through 4.
Where's that coffee?
Hi. Second by Mrs. Dingman, please.
Should open a coffee shop in Red Creek.
I should, you know what, that's a great idea. Any questions on this group? Okay, when you're ready.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker, Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
and Mrs. Madigan.
Yes, you can put a little frown face next to Mrs. Decker for that one. Okay, F5, I would take a motion to table this particular item since it doesn't need to be, everybody knows, thank you. Mrs. Dingman, Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
score.
Got in there.
Any questions about that? We talked about that this could be moved to the 24th. The language cleared up when you're ready. Oh, we don't need a vote, never mind. I'm gonna table that, moving on. If somebody wants to make a motion for a
I'll make
group,
a motion for 6 through 12.
I have a second on F 6 through 12. Mrs. Bliss? Any questions? When you're ready.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Madigan.
Yes. Thank you. Take a motion for something?
I would make a motion for F 13 and 14.
Okay, I have a second. Mrs. Bliss? Any questions on this, on these two? We're voting on 13 and 14 when you're ready.
Mrs. Kaiser,
Yes.
Mrs. Dingman,
Yes.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
Yes.
Mrs. Allen,
Yes.
and Mrs. Madigan.
Yes, thank you. Last two together, separate. I take a motion for
Put them
either.
I'll make a motion to put 15 and 16. I think it was F.
Okay,
without
Mrs. Dingman,
going-
for F 15 and 16, can I have a second, please? Mrs. Kaiser? Any questions? When you're ready.
Mrs. Decker,
Yes.
Mrs. Bliss,
No.
Mrs. Dingman,
No.
Mrs. Kaiser,
No.
Mrs. Allen,
No.
and Mrs. Madigan.
Okay, thank you. Administrative reports, any questions or anything on those? I thought they were great this time, so good job, kudos to you guys.
I love the pictures you guys include.
Yeah, I
Thank
do
you.
enjoy the pictures, so.
Little holiday spirit in there, a couple places.
Pictures.
So I
Miss-
know Mr. Welcher's not here, but 100 kids signed up for swim, and I think that that's wonderful. Like, it's a great service that we're offering to our kids, so.
Absolutely. Did you have anything else tonight?
I'm just flipping through.
Okay.
No, I don't.
Okay. Okay, I would take a motion to move an exec for particular personnel matter, please. Mrs. Dingman, and a second by Mrs. Bliss. Thank you very much.
Look at that time.
I know, I would suggest anyone in Mr. Clemens' class, make sure that he watches the video, because some of you watched questions, maybe some extra credit, who knows?
And Tucker, can you come on